In 170 Ancient, the prophet Andraste was betrayed by her husband to the Archon of the Tevinter Imperium. She was executed, and in return her husband, the warlord Maferath, gained peace, uncontested rule over all lands from Navarra to Ferelden. But Maferath's sons killed him when his betrayal came to light 10 years later, and their rules did not last much longer. The Imperium was poised to reconquer the Free Marches, but were distracted by a rebellion in the east that would ultimately create the Kingdom of Ravain. Thus the south fell into chaos for decades. The faith of Andraste spread across the south in the form of innumerable localized cults. Tribal leaders, warlords, and city-states fought over everything from faith to land and wealth. Users of magic ran unchecked and were targeted for their abilities in lands where mages were blamed for everything from the excesses of the Imperium and the death of Andraste to the Blight itself. In 100 Ancient, this chaos gave rise to the Inquisition, a zealous group of Andrastians that came together to bring a sense of order to southern Thedas. For their sign, they adopted two very old symbols. The constellation Visus, or the Watchful Eye, had been associated with the goddess called the Lady of the Skies in Alamari culture, but among Andraste's followers it had become associated with the Maker. They also adopted the downward sword of the constellation Judex, which had long been a symbol of justice in the Old Imperium, also known as the Sword of Mercy and associated with the blade that ended Andraste's suffering on the pyre. The Inquisition combined these symbols to form their sign. The records of their time are somewhat confused. They were known for convening impromptu courts when they identified wrongdoing, regardless of the status or power of the perpetrator. Some characterize it as a reign of terror, with the Inquisition ruthlessly rooting out the tyranny of magic in any form they saw fit: blood mages, abominations, cultists, and heretics. Others have suggested that this negative portrayal arose from the Inquisition's willingness to go after the powerful and unswerving commitment to weeding out corruption, a tendency that made them few friends. All indications are that they were even-handed in their treatment of mages and regular people alike, as they allowed mages among their leadership. The elite members of the Inquisition had a secret ritual, later known as the Rite of Tranquility, by which non-mages would have their connection to the Fade and capacity for emotion stripped. By coming into contact with a spirit, such as drawn by intense focus and faith during a vigil, that connection was restored, and the individual would gain the ability to negate magic and become immune to possession. Some might gain additional abilities that differed from person to person. Cassandra Pentagast was able to set lyrium in a person's blood aflame after her vigil. They discovered quite by accident that a mage who undergoes the ritual loses their ability to use magic along with their emotions. In the final years of the Inquisition, they discovered that similar magic-negating abilities could be gained by ingesting prepared lyrium, a simpler method, or so it seemed, than the strenuous process of being made tranquil and then cured by a spirit of faith. The Inquisition had been operating in the south of Thedas for a century when Cordelis Draken founded the Orlesian Chantry in 1-1 Divine. Draken had forged the strife-riven kingdom of Orlais into an empire unified by a single faith in the years prior. His chantry effectively outlawed magic, forbidding mages from casting almost any spells. When the Second Blight broke out a few years later, Draken marshaled his armies and broke with the rules of his own chantry to invite the mages of his empire to fight the Darkspawn with him. To the Inquisition, he must have seemed a force of order in a world that had been mired in chaos for lifetimes. Draken befriended a member of the Inquisition named Ameridin. That Ameridin was a Dalish mage that worshipped both Andraste's Maker and the Elven Pantheon were facts lost to history until quite recently. He was assumed to be human by the humans of Thedas for many ages. At Draken's encouragement, Ameridin ultimately became the Inquisitor, the leader of the Inquisition. Together, they presented a united front to the world. Draken and the Inquisition wanted to reform the role of magic in Thedas, especially in light of the aid mages had given to fighting the Second Blight. And so the Inquisition was merged with Draken's Chantry with the signing of the Navaran Accords in 120 Divine, an agreement that founded the Circles of Magi, places where mages would have a greater degree of autonomy than they had before, while kept safe from a world that was still suspicious of them, at least in theory. Their magic could be practiced safely away from the general populace. The Inquisition was broken up. The members of the organization were re-established as the Templar Order, knights that took lyrium to gain magic-negating abilities. They hunted apostates, mages living outside the circles, maleficarum, practitioners of forbidden magic, and possessed abominations, but their chief duty was to guard the Chantry and Circles of Magi, ostensibly both to protect mages from the outside world, and to protect the outside world from the dangers of magic. The leaders of the Inquisition became the Seekers of Truth, a secretive order that worked to defend the Chantry from internal and external threats, be that hunting particularly dangerous maleficar or policing corruption among the Templars. The last Inquisitor was not among them, however, for he had disappeared shortly after the signing of the Accord on an expedition to the Frostback Mountains to investigate a wave of attacks from the Avar barbarians. As the Inquisition was split, so was its heraldry. The Templar Order took the Sword of Mercy as their crest, while the Seekers adopted the Watchful Eye. As the Chantry faith was adopted across the continent, so too was the system of Circles of Magi and their Templar Guards. This system would see much strain over the centuries, however. Many mages came to see the Templars more as jailers than guards, and far too many Templars were willing to abuse the power they had over the mages. One particular point of contention was the Rite of Tranquility. The Seekers had shared the ritual with the Circles to be used on mages that could not be trusted with their abilities as an alternative to execution, but kept the secret of its reversibility to themselves. It was a punishment many mages viewed as inhumane and unwarranted, to be stripped of not only one's magic but also one's emotions. In the Dragon Age, the stability of the Circles of Magi came crashing down after years of mounting tension, in part spurred by the particularly poor condition of Kirkwall's Circles of Magi, where an apostate named Anders destroyed the city's Chantry, murdering the Grand Cleric and many others in the process. The Knight Commander of the city's Templars reacted by attempting to enact the Rite of Annulment on the Circle of Magi. Most of the Circle was killed in the ensuing fight, but those who escaped spread word of the event to other circles, and unrest grew among the mages. The College of Enchanters, the governing body of the mages, was dissolved by the Chantry after the newly appointed Grand Enchanter Fiona introduced a motion to secede from the Chantry, despite the motion failing to get enough votes. A senior enchanter of the White Spire in Orlais attempted to assassinate the Divine, prompting Lord Seeker Lambert to seize control of the Circle Tower. On the other side of Thedas, the Circle of Magi in Ravane was massacred when visiting Templars discovered they were practicing local Ravani customs of spirit communion that clashed with Chantry orthodoxy. The violence came to a head in 940 Dragon in a revolt at the White Spire, when the College of Enchanters was reconvened to discuss the discovery of the way to reverse tranquility with the support of Divine Justinia V. Grand Enchanter Fiona took the opportunity to hold another vote on seceding from the Chantry, but before any vote could take place, the cured Tranquil Mage was murdered, and the Lord Seeker Lambert attempted to seize a mage named Reese for the deed. Believing he was being framed, the mages refused to give him up, and a fight broke out that escalated into a full-scale revolt. The mages left their circle, and others across Thedas followed suit. Holding Divine Justinia responsible for encouraging the mages and preventing the Templars from cracking down on them, Lord Seeker Lambert declared that the Chantry had violated the Navaran Accord and broke the Templar Order and Seekers of Truth away from the Chantry. The south of Thedas fell into chaos as Templars and mages fought. The Chantry was left with only a handful of loyalist seekers and Templars at its command. Divine Justinia V believed drastic action would be necessary if the Chantry could not bring an end to the conflict. She issued a writ, ordering the refounding of the Inquisition to bring order once again as a backup plan. Thus, more than 8 centuries after being dissolved, a new incarnation of the Inquisition was born. She entrusted the task of founding and recruiting leaders of the new order to her most trusted agents, her left hand, Sister Nightingale, the ex-bard Leliana, and her right hand, Seeker Cassandra Pentagast. Hoping to recruit a leader that was both capable and accomplished enough to demand respect from mages and Templars alike, Leliana and Cassandra first attempted to recruit the Warden Commander of Ferelden, well known for heroism against the Darkspawn, but were unable to locate the Warden. Instead, they turned to Hawk, the champion of Kirkwall, who had been deeply embroiled in the strife between mages and Templars in the city several years prior. Despite interrogating the champion's companion, Varric Tethris, at length, they found that the champion had vanished. That is not to say their recruiting efforts were entirely unsuccessful. Leliana enlisted an old associate, Josephine Montillier, to act as the Inquisition's diplomat, while herself serving as spymaster. Cassandra was impressed by Knight Captain Cullen Rutherford's ability to rally Kirkwall's Templars after the death of Knight Commander Meredith, as well as that he was willing to turn against her when the Knight Commander attempted to execute the champion of Kirkwall. Cullen was recruited and named commander of the Inquisition's forces, meager as they were. In the meantime, Lord Seeker Lambert had vanished almost as soon as he broke the Templars and Seekers away from the Chantry, and the fighting floundered to a stalemate. To complicate matters, the War of the Lions had broken out in Orlais at this time, sending the Chantry's most influential ally into chaos. In 941 Dragon, Divine Justinia V made one last effort to bring the conflict between mages and Templars to a close by organizing the Divine Conclave at the Temple of Sacred Ashes in the Frostback Mountains. There, on the sacred ground where the ashes of the prophet Andraste had been laid to rest, Justinia hoped to negotiate a resolution. Prominent leaders from both sides of the conflict agreed to come, though both Grand Enchanter Fiona and the new Lord Seeker Lucius sent only representatives. A company of Tal Vashoth mercenaries were hired to maintain security between the two camps. Agents of everyone from human lords to Dalish elves and Carta-Lyrium smugglers came to be the first to hear the results of the gathering and use it to their advantage. None of them could have anticipated what would happen, but it would change the mission of the Inquisition dramatically. A creature called Corypheus, known as the Elder One to his followers, infiltrated the conclave with a group of Grey Wardens he controlled. From his own words, he was a mage once that led others in a ritual to reach the Golden City in the Fade. The result warped him into a blighted creature, and after escaping a millennium of imprisonment, he had assembled a covert army of followers. Corypheus had acquired an elven relic that he believed would allow him to return to the Black City and ascend to godhood, if only he could unlock it, and so he chose to use Divine Justinia as a sacrifice to do so. But the ritual was interrupted by a bystander that distracted the old Magister long enough for the Divine to knock the elven relic from his hands. The power he sought was instead transferred to the interloper, and a massive explosion leveled the Temple of Sacred Ashes, killing most in attendance. Worse, a massive tear in the veil known as the Breach was torn in the sky above the temple, causing demons to pour forth into the world. The veil was sundered across the south and beyond, with many smaller rifts opening across the countryside. When help came to what remained of the temple, they saw someone, the interloper who had interrupted the ritual, tumble out of a rift with a shining figure behind them. The unconscious sole survivor was taken prisoner, suspected of being behind the attack on the conclave, but after days of demons raining from the sky, the survivor awoke. It was discovered that the glowing mark on the prisoner's hand, later called the anchor, could close the rifts, and with some help even the breach itself. News of the shining figure that had saved the survivor spread, and soon rumors were saying that the survivor was the Herald of Andraste, sent to save them from calamity. And thus in the village of Haven, the new Inquisition was formally announced, with a new mission. They would seal the breach and uncover the plots of those responsible. With instrumental aid from the Herald, the Inquisition interfered with Corypheus' efforts to subvert the surviving mages and Templars. With the help of those who escaped Corypheus' control, the Herald was able to close the breach, only for Corypheus and his followers to attack their headquarters at Haven directly. The Inquisition was forced to flee through a secret mountain path, while the Herald triggered an avalanche to bury Corypheus' army. The apparently miraculous survival of the Herald bolstered the belief among the Inquisition soldiers that they had a sacred mission. Solus, an apostate elf that had joined the New Order, led them to a long-forgotten fortress in the Frostback Mountains, Skyhold. There the Herald was named Inquisitor, and the Inquisition finally had its leader. They set about countering Corypheus' plans for the Empire of Orlais. The Inquisitor foiled his plans to assassinate the Empress during peace talks between her and her rebellious cousin. Corypheus also planned to use his influence over the Blight corruption to trick the Grey Wardens into summoning an army of demons, using a ritual that would bind them to his will, an army that he would then use to sweep across Orlais. The Inquisition attacked the Grey Wardens at Adamant Fortress, stopping his plan in its tracks and preventing the summoning of the Nightmare, a particularly powerful demon that served Corypheus. Through all this, the Inquisition grew dramatically in wealth, influence, and martial strength, with believers in their cause flocking to join their ranks and pledge their support. Soon they were able to call upon the Orlesian armies to supplement their own in chasing Corypheus' forces into the Arbor Wilds and snatch the power of an ancient elven temple from his grasp in 942 Dragon. The Mad Magister made a last-ditch effort to tear open the breach and force his way into the Fade, but the Inquisitor stopped him and destroyed the blighted creature once and for all. The Inquisition was praised across the south. Their popularity influenced the selection of the new divine of the Chantry from their ranks, and they continued to work to restore order in the south according to the Inquisitor's will. But every rising power will face resistance. By 944 Dragon, the Orlesians and the Ferelden's had grown wary of the Inquisition's rising influence. Ferelden, displeased with the powerful paramilitary organization holding outposts within its borders, wanted the Inquisition disbanded entirely. Orlais was circling the Inquisition with a net and collar, eager to bring the organization into its sphere of influence. Eventually, the newly named Divine Victoria was pressured to call the Exalted Council, where delegates from both kingdoms were invited to help decide the future of the Inquisition. The negotiations had a rocky start that was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a Qunari warrior in the midst of the proceedings. The Inquisition discovered that the Qunari were using the Alluvians, magic elven mirrors that allowed quick travel between them through a constructed reality called the Crossroads. The invaders from Parvolan wanted to launch a simultaneous attack on leaders across Thedas to pave the way for Qunari rule. The Inquisitor was able to thwart this plot, but in the process discovered that the mysterious individual that had brought the plan to their attention in the first place was a figure of elven myth, Fen'Harel, the Dread Wolf. Or as the Inquisitor knew him, Solus, the elven apostate that had appeared so helpfully to fight Corypheus after the Divine Conclave. Fen'Harel revealed that his intentions were to tear down the veil between the waking world and the Fade, in order to restore the elves to what they had been before he created the veil in the first place, immortal beings of powerful magic. He took the Inquisitor's arm, which had been slowly killing them as the anchor grew more unstable, and departed. Upon returning to the Exalted Council, the Inquisitor was left to choose between officially disbanding the Inquisition entirely or submitting the organization to the authority of the Divine of the Orlesian Chantry. Though reduced in overt power, the Inquisition has continued to operate covertly across Thedas, with operatives appearing in the free marches in the Tevinter Imperium, all with the primary goal of countering the agents of Fen'Harel, uncovering and ultimately thwarting his plans. Well, that ended up being quite a video. I tried to avoid specifics to give a description that would work for all Inquisitors. Originally, I wanted to make this video focused on the First Inquisition and end it with the founding of the Second, but as I was trying to explain the circumstances, it just started to make more sense to just go into it. Anyway, this is going to be one of my last videos before the holidays. I'm doing a lot of traveling, both for vacations and work at the start of the year, so I'm taking a bit of a break from videos for the time being. Rest assured, I will return. I hope you liked the video, and will check out some of the others I've made. See you next time.